come on, you've been saying you wanted to make some new friends.
I know.
Well, what about that guy?
That guy over there, the one that's
He
talking
seems
to everyone.
cool.
I don't know. I really don't want to go over there.
Dude, come on, just go and talk to him.
Derek!
Excuse me?
Hi, I'm Derek.
Steve.
Nice day out today, huh, Steve?
It's kind of muggy.
Yeah, I guess it is a little bit muggy out. Do you like going to the lake?
I don't have a lake place. Do you?
Oh, I guess I don't either. I'm not sure why I said that, really.
Hey,
I guess,
it was nice meeting you. I gotta take off, though.
Oh.
We'll
yeah,
see
man.
ya.
Yeah, we'll see you later, Steve.
Hey, so how'd it go?
It went awesome.
Good morning. Good to see you all, Prairie Hiders. It can be super difficult to make friends, can it? And at any age, right? I bet you and I could point back to different stages of our life where we really struggled to make friends. And maybe there are misconceptions even of different stages of your life where whether friendships were really good or you were lacking in having really good friendships and kind of finding your people. And either scenario, I think there's this misconception that like once we become adults and we can make our own way and we can make our own decisions, that friendships should just come easy. Right? Someone's laughing. Ha 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 ha. It is not true. It is super difficult. The struggle is real to find your people. And that's the series that we're in right now, is finding your people. We're in week number 2 of a 3-week series. We're discovering why we need people to live a full life. And last week, I talked about why we should live in community. And through Paul's letter, and Paul's an apostle, and his purpose was to send the message of Jesus and the hope of Jesus and help people understand what it meant to live like Jesus. And we read in many of the New Testament books, which are, many of them are letters that Paul wrote. And in one of them, in 1 Corinthians, he was speaking to the church in Corinth. And what we learned last week was just how God designed our human bodies to work together, and that every part of our human body plays a purpose, and that without each part functioning at its best, the whole body cannot function. The same is true for our church family. The same is true for the church body as a whole throughout the world. That if you and I don't understand that our part matters, and that our engagement in the local church and being part of a church family, that God has uniquely gifted each and every one of us to be a part, that we're missing out. And not only are we missing out as individuals, but we're missing out as a church family. And so typically I wait a little bit to dig into God's word, but not today. We're just gonna dive right in, go straight to 1 Corinthians chapter 12. So if you have your Bibles, if you wanna pull up your phone, you can download the Prairie Heights app and you can follow along in the notes. Let's dig in. 1 Corinthians 12, 21 through 25, and it says this: "The eye cannot say to the hand, I don't need you. And the head cannot say to the feet, I don't need you." That's a continuation from last week. And have there been times in your life where you've told people, you probably haven't said it out loud like this, but you've thought, I don't need you. I don't need your help. I don't need you. Paul is reminding us, we need each other. It says in verse 22, "On the contrary, those parts of the body that seem to be weaker are indispensable, and the parts that we think are less honorable we treat with special honor. And the parts that are unpresentable are treated with special modesty, while our presentable parts need no special treatment. But God has put the body together, giving greater honor to the parts that lacked it, so that there should be no division in the body, but that its parts should have equal concern for each other." I'm going to read verse 25 one more time. Why did God do that? Why did God wire us and make even our human body physically in a way that each part would need each other so that there should be no division in the body? So that there should be no division among us. So that we would recognize our part in the whole and that every single part should have equal concern for each other. If you've ever been part of a team, maybe you're in extracurriculars, maybe in your family you function as a team, maybe at work you've been put on a team project. Maybe in college you were put on a team project and sometimes you get so frustrated, you're like, I hate team projects, I could just do this better alone. That's a you problem, not a them problem. Have you ever been on a sports team? And you would know if you're on a sports team that not everyone can be the point guard. Not everyone can be the quarterback. But if you only had the point guard and you only had the quarterback, you would lose every single time. I want to point out an illustration. You might think right now like that because you can hear me, because you can see me, because I'm the only one talking, that I have a lot of control right now. But you would be very mistaken if you believe that right now in this moment, I had the most control. As you can see, I do not have the most control right now because you can hardly see me, right? You can hardly see me. And also you would think that like I had control maybe over the sound. And I don't have control over the sound. Somebody else does. My two friends back there have the control, and we actually have a room back behind me called the control room. Literally, that's the name of it, because there are at least 6 people sitting behind there that are running everything around me. And today, I need to recognize every single week, I know I work on a team. I am part of a team, and if they don't do their part, I can't do my part, and if I don't do my part, they can't do their part. Do you see how this works? And oftentimes in our life, we make decisions that cause us to just get sucked back in to isolation and to believing that we don't need each other, but we do. When we choose to live our life in a way that communicates we do not need people, we're not living as God designed us to live. We're not able to experience everything that God has for us. And so what stops us from needing each other? What stops us? And there's actually a lot of things. But I'm going to dive into, it's an article written by Dr. Henry Cloud. And Dr. Henry Cloud, he's a clinical psychologist, and he's a well-known leadership speaker and coach, and he recently wrote this article called 10 Reasons We Isolate Ourselves. All of them are super eye-opening. I want to encourage you afterwards, if you want to Google it, take a picture real quick, and you can remember to Google it. Really can be help you become self-aware. It can be a good conversation with people in your life. But there is one that I want to look at in detail, because I believe that it will connect to all of us here based on where we live in the upper Midwest, and it is how self-sufficiency leads to isolation, okay? Self-sufficiency. You're going to find out real quick if that's something you really struggle with. Ready? The problem, this is what Dr. Henry Cloud says. He says, the problem with the relationally self-sufficient person, that means the person who says, I don't need you. I don't need help. I don't need anyone in my life. I can do it by myself. He says the problem with a self-sufficient person is that they operate in their own relational world. They run their emotional affairs like a one-person business. So emotional philosophy of a relationally self-sufficient person is this. So if you find yourself in this, you might be suffering from relational self-sufficiency. It sounds like I take care of my problems. I don't burden others with my problems. I can handle my problems myself, thank you. I'm fine, really. No, really, I'm fine. Do I need to say show of hands? I don't, do I? I bet you if you thought about your last week, you thought those things are said at least 2 out of the 3. That's an assumption. There might be some of you for sure that are in a different boat. Way to go. Dr. Henry Cloud continues, he said, what's wrong here? Like, what's wrong with that? He says God doesn't create us to be relationally self-sufficient. He made us to need each other. Our needs, do you know what our needs actually do? They teach us about love. They teach us how to love and how to receive love, and they teach us how to stay humble. True self-sufficiency is a product of sin. I'm going to say that again. True self-sufficiency is a product of sin. When you think that you can do your life by yourself, on your own, that you can take care of your own problems, that is a sin, and it is a product of sin. So if you've got the disease of self-sufficiency, you've probably had it a long time. And here's how you've probably described it. Here's how I've described it in my life. I've described it in really positive terms that sound like responsible. I'm independent. I've always been very independent, so that's my favorite. I'm independent. I can do it by myself. And I'm grown up. Only grown-ups can do it by themselves. Indeed, self-sufficiency has a lot of advantages. Let me tell you the advantages of being self-sufficient. Also in the article comes from Dr. Henry Cloud. Here are a few examples. You don't have to go to the trouble of finding people to love you. That's an advantage. You don't have to show other people the hurting, imperfect parts of yourself. You don't have to let people in to see that you're not perfect and to see the sin in your life. It's easier to not let people see that. It's easier for them to see the facade, the way you want them to see you. You don't have to look anyone in the eye and say, I need you. When's the last time you looked someone in the eye and you said, I need you? Like, I need you. You don't have to risk asking others to comfort and support you. You don't have to pick up the phone or send a text message and say, hey, can we just go play golf together? I could just really use some support right now. I'm going through some things at work, and I could just use another, maybe for guys, you would just say like, hey, I could just use another guy in my life to talk this out with, and I need your support. No wonder giving up self-sufficiency is so difficult, right? Life seems to have many more problems when your needs start to leak out. When you start to express the needs in your life. Well, self-sufficiency isn't what God desired for us. He made us to be relationally connected, to be dependent on Him and to need each other to have a full life. To recognize that together, truly, we are better. I know that's like a phrase that gets overused all the time, better together. But truly, like we are better when we are living together and we are living in community. So today we're going to discover how to live in community with one another. How do we do this? How do we do this? Fun Bible fact as we get in, there are 100 times that the phrase one another is used and written in the New Testament. And the New Testament is everything Jesus' life and after. The Old Testament is before Jesus. 59 of those times are commands that are teaching us how to or not to relate to one another. And so take a deep breath, hold on to your chair. For the next 20 or so minutes, we're going to go through all 59. Okay, are you ready? We're really not. We're not going through 59. There's no way. We'd be here for like a long time. We'd be here for many hours. So we're not going through 59. I narrowed it down. We're going to go through 3. Okay, we're going to go through 3 of the one another's, and we're going to focus on 3 verses that come from 1 Peter, and they have the 3 one another's, and I'm going to teach actually from the Amplified translation of the Bible, and I always like to say it just amps it up a little bit. It kind of gives us the words that help us really understand what these verses are saying, and so that's what you're going to see over the next 3 chunks of verses, is that they're coming from the Amplified translation, and it helps us fully understand what Peter is saying. So you ready? You ready to go through these 3 one another's? Okay, I'll assume you're ready. Let's unpack 3 directives that will help us learn how to live in community with one another. I use the word directive on purpose because these aren't suggestions. These aren't like take it or leave it. These aren't like you should. These are commands on how to live in community. So if you would like to start needing other people and to live in community, and if you would like to find your people, the next 3 one another's, and there's many other of them, so you could do some research on your own this week to discover the other ones. These 3 specifically, along with the others, are commands on how to treat one another and how to actually live in community. If you're a follower of Jesus, these are not optional. Okay, so let's dig into these 3 directives. The first one comes from 1 Peter 4:8, and it says this: above all, have a fervent and unfailing love for one another, because love covers a multitude of sins. It overlooks unkindness and unselfishly seeks the best for others. It would be fair to say if we're giving our all in relationships with other people, if in our discovery of finding your people, you begin to share more of your life, you begin to be vulnerable, you begin to share the imperfect parts of your life, relationships can get messy, can't they? We can have disagreements and arguments with our closest friends because we're different. I just had a friend who came over yesterday, and as she sat at my table, she was explaining how she had to call one of her friends because she just felt like God was giving her opportunity after opportunity to have this conversation. They've been friends for over 30 years they've been friends. And she said, all of a sudden I recognized that I wasn't there for her in a season that I really needed to be there for her. And so I called her up and I just said, hey, I'm really sorry. I should have been there for you differently and I wasn't. Will you forgive me? And the friend, she said we both were crying, and sometimes they're deeper like that, and sometimes they're not as deep like that. But what I want us to recognize is that in order to love one another, you have to give of yourself, and you have to let it get messy, and you have to practice. Sometimes you're gonna risk saying things to people that you're I'm not sure how this is gonna land. I'm not sure if they're gonna receive this. But when you love one another, when we love one another, what does it say in 1 Peter? It says, with fervent and unfailing love for one another, because love covers a multitude of sins, so that we can learn in relationships that when we sin against somebody, there's something called forgiveness and repair, that we can practice those things, and we can really love one another well. Kiesta, she's a good friend of mine here, and she is a prairie hider. And when she got baptized, we asked her, and baptism here is going public with your faith and letting everyone know that you're a follower of Jesus. And when she made that decision, part of making that decision is sharing your story. And when we asked her to share who was someone important to you that has impacted your walk with Jesus, and here's what she said. She shared about her friend Kelsey, who invited her to Prairie Heights. So Kelsey invited Kiesta to Prairie Heights, and here's what she said about Kelsey. Seeing another woman be unapologetic about her faith, her love of Jesus, and her husband's faith journey was inspirational to me, and it was something I wanted for my life. And then she said, that's Kelsey, and I'm inspired by her faith and love for others. I want us to focus on the love for others. See, when you and I love one another really well, and even when it's messy, and even when it's hard, and even when it's awkward, do you know what happens? Our life begins to reflect a life like Jesus, and other people want what we have. It becomes attractional when we love one another really, really well. So the first directive is to love one another. It's to love one another. Then the second one comes from 1 Peter 4:9, and it says this: be hospitable to one another without complaint. I'm going to sit in that for a second. Be hospitable to one another without complaint. How many people complain when you have people over at your house? How many people have been like, oh, I wish I wouldn't have invited them over, and now I got to do all these things, and oh. I can hear it. If you're watching online, you might be feeling it too. So I think for some, the part of this verse that you really need to process and think about is the without complaint. Like, what does it look like to be hospitable? But I think what happens is we have a misconception of hospitality, of Christian hospitality. What does it mean to be hospitable the way that Jesus was hospitable? And it is different. It is not entertaining. You are not entertaining, you are being hospitable. And let me explain the difference. Christian hospitality is much different than social entertaining. Entertaining focuses on the host, which means it focuses on the home being spotless. It focuses on the food being well prepared and abundant. It focuses on the host like appearing to be like really relaxed and putting on the smile that's like, I'm so glad you're here. In the back of your head, I'm like, can't wait till they leave and I gotta do the dishes and I gotta do all these things. And so like, oh yeah, just stay longer. Right? But your heart's like not super there. Here's what I want you to know. Hospitality is different. Hospitality, by contrast, focuses on the guest. Their needs. Maybe they need a place to stay. Maybe they need something to eat. Maybe they need a listening ear. Maybe your guests that night just need to be accepted where they're at. But here's the difference. Hospitality means that the guest is the primary concern. So guess what? Hospitality can happen in a messy home. It can. Your house does not need to be spotless. It can be messy. Hospitality can happen in a messy home. It can happen around a dinner table where the main course is canned soup. It can. It actually can. It can even happen while the hosts and the guests are doing chores together. And I want to tell you, like, the relationships that I know in my life that are true and we're living in community, like how to live in community, the ones that I know that like we're in it are the ones where we've done chores together at their house, at my house, because we are just in our life living in community with one another. So don't hesitate to offer hospitality just because you're too tired, just because you're too busy, because you don't think you have a big enough house to entertain. It's not entertaining, it's hospitality. And do it without complaint. That's how we live in community. That's how we live in community. So the first one was what was the first directive? Love one another. And the second one was be hospitable to one another. The third one comes from 1 Peter 4:10. It says this, just as each of you has received a special gift, a spiritual talent, an ability graciously given by God, employ it in serving one another as is appropriate for good stewards of God's multifaceted grace, faithfully using the diverse, varied gifts and abilities granted to Christians by God's unmerited favor. That's a lot of words. That ties in to everything that we're learning in 1 Corinthians, right? That we would have spiritual talents, that we would have a special gift to offer, that it's been given to us by God, and that we would employ it by serving others and serving one another, that we would be good stewards of God's grace. Like that means that God's given us grace in a lot of areas of our life. I've been given so much grace by God. I've messed up over and over again, and I've received his love over and over and over again. And through that grace, I can give grace and I can give love. Faithfully using the diverse, varied gifts. So the third directive in how we can live in community is to serve one another. Is to truly serve one another, to bring our gifts and talents to the table and say, hey, I'm gonna give and I'm gonna give and I'm gonna give and I'm gonna serve. And I'm gonna serve the people around me. So you heard me, if you listened last week, I shared one of the things that my husband Kyle and I are working on, are asking for help a little bit more often of one another. And so as I began writing this message, I just know kind of how God has been growing and stretching Kyle in this area of finding your people. And so I've invited him to come and share a little bit of his story. And so thanks for helping.
Yeah, thank you. you, thank you, thank you.
See, they have the control. They have all the control.
You know, a lot of times Beth will tell these great stories about how awesome I am. This is not one of those times, so thank you for inviting me to authentically tell everybody how I've missed in this area.
Hey, great.
Yeah,
Yeah.
appreciate that.
Thanks for saying yes. Because it is true. Like, I didn't want to, on your behalf, share, like, here's how my husband's messed up in this area. So I thought I'd invite you to do it.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, and it's like listening to Beth's sermon here, it's like I have lived the opposite of that my whole entire life. And gosh darn it, it's hard to do friends, isn't it? Like all my life, I've just had like one or two people. Relationally speaking, that's kind of how I've been built. In elementary school, I've had one person. In high school, I had a teammate. And then in college, I had a teammate and another friend and a roommate. And then I got married, had kids, got a job, and in a Tom Hanks, Wilson Castaway kind of way, my most important relationship became my motorcycle.
It wasn't a volleyball.
Rationally speaking, I keep thinking, is it really that bad to have your best friend be a motorcycle? And like Beth keeps saying, yeah, you need people, like real people.
And it can't just be me. Like, right, we developed a really good friendship in our marriage. And we're more than friends, but I can't be your only friend.
Right. And God has been definitely prompting my heart to work in this area for a long time, and He is still doing that. And the first thing that God kind of showed me was, as Beth was talking about, just to live that servant-hearted life. Like I believe so much in the significance of service. But it wasn't until recently that I connected the dots between serving and friendship. For me, the busyness of business has been a sin for me. Like, I am a task-oriented individual who has always put work ahead of relationships. I've been in this mindset where it's like, I just got one more thing to do. If I can cross this one thing off, I'll be fine. You know what? I got one more phone call to make. I got one more meeting to make. I got one more. I, self. And, maybe you're like me. We get caught up in paychecks and promotions and progress. Like, I love progress more than anybody in the world. I love progress.
And projects.
See, I love getting stuff done. And it's always put relationships on the back burner. And there is, as I look back on my life and I see the relationships in my life and look back at how they played, I can look back and see the healthy ones, and I can look back and see the unhealthy ones. The unhealthy people would take, and they would take, and they would take, and kind of like a parasite, they would take some more until there was nothing left. And then you know what happened? The relationship was over. And I can look back at those healthy people, and they would give, and they would give, and they would give. Mm-hmm. And even when I didn't deserve it, when I needed it most, they would give a hand, they would give an ear. And that is the essence of a servant-hearted posture. A servant-hearted posture will always say, what can I give, and expects nothing in return. And there is a quote that I absolutely love by Paul Kellerman. He says that the only path to genuine happiness and fulfillment is through service. It is only as we give ourselves away that we can truly discover ourselves. And I love that because it hit home for me. And as I began to give myself away, both at home and at church, I began to see who God created me to be. For far too much of my life, I really cared way too much about what other people thought of me. So I would bend and conform to what I thought I needed to be liked. I would do what the world said I needed to be liked. And it wasn't only until, I would say, a spiritually and emotionally healthy person knows who God created them to be. And they are okay talking about their insecurities and their flaws and their fears. And it wasn't until I began this journey and found out who God created me to be that I was okay with taking off that mask, that I stopped pretending, and opened up enough to start sharing with people like that real, raw, vulnerable stuff. Crazy thing, you know what happened? Those other people started sharing some of the same stuff. And like the farmer in me began to see and feel the relational roots begin to take place. And I'd say the last and most important thing for me was that my relationship with God was my number one relationship. When God was my first and only best relationship, I found myself surrounded by other God-first people. And that is a super powerful principle and truth that I hope you guys live and know. Like, have you ever wondered how the disciples stayed together? You've got this hodgepodge group of people from every background, from all over, and they're asked to do this crazy thing. They're asked to follow this crazy Jesus guy, this radical leader, and then all of a sudden their leader is killed, and then their lives are threatened. No paycheck, no security, no retirement fund, none of that. What kept them together? And like in the Bible it talks about how in marriage, like when people are married under the umbrella of God's unity, when God enters that marriage, they're like he is that bonding material that holds them together, and there is nothing, no height nor depth, no principality, not even death that can separate that. And I think the same is true for relationships. When God is that foundational element, that bonding material, that's a place when real, authentic, lifelong, lasting relationships can occur. So when I was thinking about like, how can I close this? I was like, I think pastors get pastor points for like coming up with like rhyming things or like things that start with the same letter. So I'm a farmer and I'm new to this, so I'm like, so here's my pastor points earning statement. Get ready. Fellowship with faithful friends equals a life of fulfillment. Yes.
It's very good. Can you say it one more time?
Fellowship with faithful friends will equal a life of fulfillment.
As we find our people.
As we find our people. Yeah.
Better together. We need each other. That was really good. Has the process, though, because this last year you've really been intentional about finding other men specifically, and to engage in life with and be vulnerable with. What does that look like for you? Like, because truly, you guys see the high fiver, and the greeter out in the front, but naturally he's very introverted and very quiet, and so at home he's very quiet, very quiet. So just letting you know that this, adding credibility to how hard it is.
Like, I would say the underlying thing is like fear and awkwardness. This is a super weird and awkward story, so bear with me. But like, I remember when I originally reached out to someone, like God had placed it on my heart to reach out to this person. So I texted them, hey, you want to hang out? Yeah, great. I'm like, oh, first hurdle. They said yes, they actually want to hang out with me. And then we like have coffee and we talk, and like that's new to me. We're talking, and then it goes good, and the conversation is ending. And I'm like, oh, I did it. I did relationship. And then they're like, hey, we should do this again. I'm like, yeah, like this is just something they say. Yeah, we should do this again. And then they go, how about next Thursday? And I'm like a week from now, next Thursday? Let me check my calendar. And I'm a farmer. I don't put anything in my calendar. There's nothing on my calendar. Thursday, yeah. Thursday's a work day, so I'm like, I work on work days, but be relational, Kyle. Be relational. Like, I'll juggle some stuff. I'll make it work. So, no joke. As I'm driving up the next week, it's like, what am I going to talk about? I said everything I knew last week. So that's my story, and I'm just sticking with it, and it takes work. It takes time, and I think church is a great place to find your people. And it's been that for me. As I've learned to serve, gotten involved in serving, and done some of that work with people, I've really, truly been surrounded by those God-first people. Mm-hmm. And then those relationships have happened, and it's been good. And I'm on a journey, so.
As we all are.
Yes, and it's like, if I have to work on relationships, so do you. So there it is.
So we're going to find our people together. We're going to do that. And it's going to be awkward and it's going to be messy. And you're not going to always get it right the first time or the second time or the third time. You might have to ask different people over and over again out for lunch or out for coffee or join a different group if the first one didn't work. And you're going to have to put yourself out there. And you're going to have to be authentic and vulnerable and all those fun things. But what would it look like if all of us just committed to practicing loving one another? We practice to be hospitable to one another without complaint. We really practice serving one another. And through that process, we're going to discover more of who God is forming us to be, right? And find more people who love him. So we're going to close with a song. It's called One Thing. And it kind of relates to what you said, Kyle, is that when we all decide, if you want to make Jesus the leader of your life, there's no doubt in my mind that other people who want to make Jesus the leader of their life are going to start to show up in your life. And so as we find our people, let's not forget the core of that is our one thing. It's our relationship with Jesus. So as we get prepared for that song, Kyle, would you mind closing us with a prayer, and then we'll stand and sing.
Yeah. Dear Heavenly Father, I just thank you for this message and just the realness and relevance of it. And my hope and prayer is just really simple, that everybody who is listening to this message, that they would put in the effort and the time, and that this place, this church, Prairie Heights, would be a place where we could begin to find those real, lifelong, Christ-centered relationships. Proverbs says that there is a brother born for a time of adversity. And no doubt there are many people in this room who are going through wilderness seasons. And I know for a fact that God has brought a brother, a sister, a friend to journey with on those people, to take you through that wilderness season. So I do pray that you just work out in your ways to align these relationships. In your name we pray. Amen.
Amen.